How many times have you watched a funny video on TikTok or Instagram, only to open the comments and see the most ignorant, hateful, angry posts? We all know that social media algorithms heavily favor outrage and negativity for engagement, but I think another less talked about component here is also at play. Let me ask you another question. How many of you have seen or related to the meme that goes something along the lines of instantly scrolling on the calculator app when walking past a group of teens? Or nothing gives me more anxiety than walking past a group of high schoolers?
It was scary.
Now, we've all probably experienced this feeling when we were younger, but what really interests me is how many adults also seem to relate to this meme. We all know teens can be ruthless, and especially today as study after study shows social media use lowers empathy and increases bullying, but I think the popularity of this meme sort of encapsulates the thesis of today's video. So much of the vitriol, negativity, and trolling immaturity online isn't just the result of algorithms or massive bot farms, but also because a large portion of users on these apps are teens and children, and because this demographic has more time to spare, their influence and therefore anger is overrepresented on them. I believe that teens and children not only make up the largest user base on social media, but also spend the most time on it, which has helped the normalization and even justification of ignorance and schoolboy-like immaturity. On the flip side, this massive, highly influenceable user base has also helped seemingly random people become rich overnight. How many times have you asked yourself, why is this person even famous? Well, the answer is because millions of impressionable, easily persuadable kids thought they should be. I think without a massive youth user base online, the influencer wouldn't be as profitable and lucrative as it has become today. In this video, I want to talk about how the massive influence of children and teens online helps create, sustain, and normalize toxic, immature rhetoric and worldviews. We'll talk about underage rage and how it fosters cancel culture, and also how this dynamic hurts both parties, causing kids to compare themselves to adults, leading to a disappearance of childhood. Now, before I go on, I just want to clarify, I'm not trying to say that I think children specifically are the single reason for all the problems online, because obviously there are many reasons the internet has become toxic. Again, like negative algorithms for engagement, or the fact that social media brings like-minded angry people together, which lowers tolerance and favors echo chambers. I also don't want to make it seem that I think young people's opinions inherently hold zero value, because I actually think young people and kids have a stronger sense of morality and that their differing perspectives can be refreshing, and I just don't want this video to seem super black and white and like I hate all kids and fuck them kids and everything. That's not what I'm trying to say here. Now, for most of human history, interactions happened face to face or through a regulated medium like letters or phone calls. In other words, you had a somewhat accurate perception of the person you were interacting with. In the real world, serious interactions happen between adults, and we have more control over the people we choose to interact with or what opinions we want to entertain. This gives us a more balanced perception of the world and a way to simply disregard or even completely avoid ignorant or immature opinions. Once you level the playing field and make all interactions free, online, and even anonymous, adults are now interacting with children, a lot of times without even knowing it. I know this all sounds obvious enough, but really think about how interactions happen online versus real life. We all encounter immature or annoying people in person, but you can see what they look like, their age, their behaviors, if they take care of themselves, their little human mannerisms that help you better understand what type of person they are. Based on all these traits, you rather quickly develop an opinion of them and can decide if theirs truly matters. Blank text in an online comment is a blank slate, allowing you to subconsciously project an identity onto it, making it more likely that it will affect or bother you. This leads to people engaging with these comments and by default normalizing and justifying these mindsets. Now, like I said earlier, the spread of misinformation, rise of the right wing, and rampant negativity online also plays a huge part in all of this. But again, I think a lot of people probably already know that and just underestimate the negative effects of allowing immature kids or trolls to freely interact with adults. This also doesn't just go one way. It's well known that these interactions also have obvious negative consequences for children. From predators having easier access to kids, to body image issues, to kids not allowing themselves to be kids because their perception is distorted by feeds filled with 20-something influencers living their best lives. The point is social media is creating this new dynamic where not just all opinions, cultures, or countries converge in this global town square, but also ages, and how that wasn't really possible before. Kids should be allowed to be kids, and adults shouldn't be unknowingly forced to interact with them. Another aspect that I don't think is touched on enough is just how much cancel culture is influenced by teens and kids. Now, while you can't really prove the ages of people who cancel or who even use social media the most due to anonymity and being able to lie about your age when making an account, I would still hypothesize that a big reason cancel culture exists in the way it does is due to something I call underage rage. As we should all know by now, social media is built to outrage, depress, and irritate, then laugh, satisfy, and dopamine squirt, so our brains can get stuck in a chemically induced stress dopamine response cycle. No matter what age you are, social media can get annoying and depressing, but now imagine you're a teen living in a hyper individualistic world, isolated in some infinitely sprawling suburb, without a job or real social life, constantly scrolling on a negativity outrage inducing app for engagement. All you see all day is how the world is ending and how perfect other people's lives are, all while you're stuck living a life that isn't really yours yet due to the limitations of your age. Your hormones are raging, frontal lobe underdeveloped, and emotional regulation nearly non existent. Basically, the perfect candidate for rage posting or engaging in cancel culture. Because of the lack of real life, friends, or career, you now have the most time to spend on these apps, meaning if you choose to cancel someone or spread your unhinged opinion, it will then be overrepresented and therefore seen by others as popular or normal. And while I do personally think that the strict accountability cancel culture has caused is a positive thing to an extent, I also think the rapid rise of any and all forms of it is a direct result of this. There are many things that people get canceled for that a lot of us can't even take seriously or find laughable, but I think understanding that a lot of this is driven by hordes and hordes of agitated, chronically online teens helps better put things into perspective. I think when you validate the inexperienced, immature, and ignorant through interactions and online debate, you sort of get pulled down with them. From the social psychological perspective, this happens simply because we are social creatures that subconsciously mirror the ones we are around in order to fit in. And from the intellectual perspective, to defeat your opponent in a debate, a lot of times you have to get inside their head and figure out how they think to undo them. The only problem is that once this happens, you now know how that type of person thinks, and it can then leave an unintentional, lasting impact. Honestly, this all really reminds me of the atheist debates I would watch growing up and how there were a lot of scientists who thought debating young earth creationists or flat earthers was wrong because of how it unintentionally validated those beliefs through respectable scientific discourse.
You cannot ever prove using the scientific method in the present, you can't prove the age of the earth. So you can never prove it's old. So there is no hypothetical.
I feel like in the same way, even just responding to certain comments says indirectly to that person, hey, I respect and take your opinion serious enough to respond and disagree with it. Another way to look at it is if grown adults only hung around teenagers, took them seriously, and consistently argued or debated with them, these adults could eventually begin to emulate their behavior. This is how I view the dynamic that social media is creating. It's not even really intentional at times, it's just the fact that everyone is so algorithmically agitated, the prevalence of online anonymity and trolls, and because younger people tend to have far more time on their hands. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I've seen plenty of adults and older people acting immature and toxic online. It's unfair to blame it all on young people. And to that I would say, yes, you're right. Of course, there are toxic people of all ages online. And my point isn't that it's 100% young people's fault. Because again, the algorithm boosts negativity no matter the age. However, I do still think that maybe adults who may not have been as toxic before being online may now think it's acceptable and even normal because of how commonplace it is. I understand it more from a sociological, psychological perspective and how much we are influenced by how others behave, especially if it appears it is common. If you are around certain behaviors enough, you will eventually normalize and even emulate them. On top of all the other problems that technology and social media are creating, I think this immersion we have online and all types of immature or misinformed mindsets is causing it to rub off on others and propagate beliefs and behaviors that most people grow out of or are able to avoid after high school. This new dynamic forces the individual to have to decipher themselves what is fake news, what's ignorant, and what is worth interacting with. And I don't know about you, but I do not have faith that most people have enough critical thinking skills to be able to accurately do that. This leads to this degradation of our perception of what is normal and what are commonly held beliefs. I mean, even just looking at the spread of misinformation in general. The election of Donald Trump helped propel conspiracy to the forefront and forced us to have to debate with and take unthinkable ignorance seriously. Before the availability of social media or the connectivity of the internet, Most people had to really work and prove that they deserved to be put in a place of power and influence where they could spread their ideas to large audiences. Now, anyone and everyone can do this, and their ideas can go extremely far and impact more people than what was ever possible before. So, of course, the connectivity of the internet leads to many great things, like the spread of ideas and helping movements organize. But let's be real here, there's a reason why at family gatherings, the children are sat at a separate table and the crazies don't get invited at all. Social media has us all sat at the same table and forces us to hear and sometimes take seriously everyone's unhinged, drunken, or angst fueled arguments.